What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality podcast. I'm your host. I'm Caitlin Kenna Smith, and on today's podcast, I talk to my great friend, Tara Moore. Tara is a real estate agent, a mother, a wife, an incredible human being, and a former registered nurse. In our conversation, we get a little bit controversial, as I like it, and we break down her experience working as a nurse in the ER during 2020 and some of the unfortunate things that she saw that became troubling enough for her to begin questioning a lot of things in our world. We dive into a lot of different things surrounding the medical system, our personal experiences with our autoimmune diseases, and how there always seems to be an agenda that doesn't always have our freedom's best interest in mind. Of course, we also laugh. We have a little bit of fun telling some stories over the last few years of us being friends. And Tara gives some great advice on what to do if you're afraid to take a risk in life, like she did when she left her job in nursing to start real estate with her husband. Make sure you go into the show notes down below and you follow Tara's journey on social media. You share this episode and enjoy it. What's up, guys? So today I have my friend Tara Moore on the podcast, and I'm so fucking excited to have Tara on the podcast because we've been trying to get this together for a very long time. And I'll let Tara introduce herself in a bit, but we go like 2 years back at this point. Tara was at my wedding, and she's just been like an incredible person. And I know that a lot of the people who listen to this podcast know Tara. And if you know Tara, you know she probably has like the biggest heart that you'll ever meet. But Tara, I'll let you introduce yourself. Like, who are you? And what are you doing in your life?
I'm Tara Moore. I live in the great state of Oklahoma. I was in the medical field for probably 16 years. I was a registered nurse at bedside for 12 and a half of those, and then ended up bowing out of the medical community due to some personal things and some other things going on, and got into real estate. And now me and my husband sell real estate full time in Oklahoma.
That's so
I
cool.
met you online.
Yeah. If anybody's in Oklahoma and is in need of a home. Right? But I think it's so cool that you and Justin are doing this together because he was in the medical community as well, correct?
Yeah, he was a cardiac ICU nurse.
Yeah. So you guys were in it for a while, and that's kind of the biggest part that we're going to touch on because when we initially wanted to schedule this podcast, which again was a very long time ago, and now we're finally getting it done, we really were like in the thick of like all of the bullshit of the COVID scenario with like, and then Tara being pretty fresh on leaving the medical system for certain situations. But I want to really get into your background, how you got into the medical system first, how you became a registered nurse, and kind of like what brought you there. Let's start there.
I said I would never be a nurse. My mom was
Funny.
a registered nurse. Yeah. I was like, I will do anything but that. I traveled to Peru in the year 2005. I had just graduated high school, and I was literally sitting at dinner one night, and a girl sitting around me was talking about her being in nursing school. And it was literally like, you know how people joke, they're like, if there was ever, can God just send me like the flashing sign? It was literally crazy that it was literally like an internal voice that was like, you need to go to nursing school. And I was like, no, I will not.
Fuck you.
And immediately right back, I heard that same voice and was like, I'll get you through it. And I was like, what is going? It was wild. It was absolutely wild. And because I hadn't experienced anything like that before.
Yeah. And
So,
that's truly like something you can't really ignore at that point.
for sure. Like, I mean, you can, but it may not work
It's
out.
hard.
Yeah. And so I came back and I started enrolling in prereqs for nursing, and kind of the rest is history. I became a registered nurse in 2009 is when I graduated, and passed boards early 2010. And there I was.
Dang. So what did you want to be? You said you didn't want to be a registered nurse. Did you have any sort of career path that you actually wanted to go down?
Growing up, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Living in Oklahoma, I literally, my family was like, we don't have an ocean here. Like, you can't be a marine biologist. Nobody ever mentioned like, oh, you can leave, you know? And then I was going to go into be a sign language interpreter because I had a good friend that was a sign language interpreter. And I was like, that's cool. And that was really it. I never had any other thought attached to it. I feel like the conversations I have with my kids now, as far as like career and making money and building a life, are very different than what I had. It was very much within a go to school, get good grades, go to
Right.
college, and you'll figure it out. You know?
Yeah, I feel like in today's day and age, it's very, very different. Like at this point in time, like Stone and I have this conversation all the time. It's like if our kids don't want to go to college, like they don't have to go to college because at this point you can learn anything that you want online. And unless you want to be in the medical field or a lawyer, then you don't really need a degree to call yourself good at whatever job you're about to do.
Correct. And that's what we have. Like, hey, there are some things that you need a piece of paper for if you want to do that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and these look like X, Y, and Z. But in the meantime, like, let's just figure out what you love. Like,
Yeah.
if you figure out what you love and what sets your soul on fire, like everything else changes.
Absolutely. And I think so many people never truly find that because they're almost like forced down this path that they think is the right way to go. Like, got to go get my degree, get my 9 to 5 job, be at that job, earn my benefits, and do all that shit. And then they find themselves at the end of their life and they're like, wow, I never actually fully, truly found what I was put on this earth to do.
Hmm. Yep.
So we want to change that.
That's for right. For real. If I,
So
I'm
let's talk about you became a registered nurse,
Mhm.
right? And then did you like it? Did you hate it? Did
um,
it light your on fire when you first initially started, or did you find that maybe it was missing something?
I mean, I always enjoyed people. Like I waited tables in high
Yeah.
school and in college. I loved that. I loved that interaction. I loved that networking aspect. Looking back,
Mhm.
that's the garbage I have for it. Then I did that wasn't what I understood.
Right.
Um, I did. I loved cardiac. Cardiac was I risked and was like, you know what, I'm gonna try because the hospital that I worked at originally was like, I mean, it was like if you worked there, I mean, it was just really well respected.
Hmm.
People wanted to work there. They didn't advertise. They didn't have to advertise because so many people wanted to work there.
Hmm.
And I knew someone that did, and so I got in there and I loved it. Um, I loved it after I got past my fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to kill anybody.
Right. I feel like that would be a fear. I could definitely see that being something. Like I've spoken to people who are in like nurses or doctors where initially like that is something that scares you, especially if like you watch like those medical shows, right? That are
Yes.
so accurate.
So accurate. Don't shock the flatline, guys. We don't do that. You need a rhythm,
Yeah.
okay? Then we shock.
Yeah, let's just watch Grey's Anatomy and we can earn our medical degrees off of that.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, and then I had babies a year and a half after I got my nursing license. We moved to California. So I was a nurse there, worked in a step down unit. So like we just did a lot. We managed a lot of insulin drips. We managed just heavy load patients that had a lot of meds, a lot of things. Basically, if you can survive there, you can survive anywhere. So I became
Mhm.
a really strong nurse, I felt like.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until, I don't know, I did not love it until, a certain time period.
Yeah,
So,
so I didn't even know that you moved to California at that point.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
what brought you back?
so born and raised in Oklahoma, both me and my
Mhm.
husband. We moved out to Northern California. We were there for 3 years. We had our babies out there. We did not plan that. There's something in the water there, y'all. Like, I don't know. And then we moved back to Oklahoma in 2013 for Justin to go to nursing school,
Okay.
because there wasn't really any jobs in Northern California that for what he was doing at that time. He was
Hmm.
just like, what do you want to do? And again, one of those things where I'm like, if that's not a flashing light, we've had 7 people this week ask us, is your husband a nurse? And I'm like, no, I'm the nurse. He's not the nurse. And so we just kind of rolled with it. And he got his nursing license in 2016.
Okay. Okay. So then tell me about what happened in 2020.
Which part? How it
Where did
started?
it
I was working that
where did
night.
it begin? Let's start with how it all began. Let's tell
Okay.
Tara's behind the scenes story from the medical
Yeah.
system.
Oh, so I was actually working in a small emergency room at that time, in an orthopedic hospital. So, like, we strictly dealt with bones, joints, those sort of things typically. But if you have a specialty hospital, it's required that you have an emergency room that can
Right.
treat everything. So I was actually working the night. Who was, it was the NBA game. The NBA game was going on here in Oklahoma City. The Thunder was supposed to play that night.
Hmm.
And I want to say it was the Jazz game.
Hmm.
And it was like postponed. The kids had just gotten out for spring break that day. And COVID was chatter. Like people were
Yeah.
talking about it in other places. It had kind of been chatter since November, December of 19. Um, and then as they kind of postponed the game more and more, like we were all like, I bet they're gonna, so a player tested positive and they're probably gonna cancel it. And I mean that's what happened. It was actually we had physicians that were working the game that were swabbing all these players and bringing stuff into our facility. And um, I had had like a low grade fever and a cough for probably 5 or 6 weeks at that time. And they actually
Five or
sent home
six
that night.
weeks.
5 or 6 weeks.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
Well, it's like if you talk to any medical person, they're like, we're the worst patients.
Yeah, I mean that's like me when it comes to like injuries or stuff. It's fine. I'm fine. I'll just walk it off, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I felt like in the beginning, though, what was happening was news kind of broke and then
Hmm.
everything started shutting down. We were
Yeah.
homeschooling our kids already that year. That was our first year homeschooling. So we didn't have to worry about the kids stuff, but both being medical, um, it was kind of like, what's going to happen? And
Yeah.
it took a few weeks for things to really kind of heat up, I guess I should say.
Yes. How was it working under that with because it wasn't just you, it was Justin, and then you guys had the
Correct.
kids at home. So
So
that's easy.
let's look at timeline. So like March was spring break time when everything kind of
Mhm.
broke. And
Right.
then at least for Oklahoma, I didn't feel like we really started seeing a mass increase of cases until the end of October of
Oh
2020.
wow, it was really that long for Oklahoma. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I
And
lived in North Carolina, so very liberal.
okay. Huh?
So it happened very
Oh,
quickly. Same thing with my family in New York. It was like, you would see on the news that they were like bringing out body bags of people
yeah.
in a hospital. So it was just a lot of like fear.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that to hear that like other parts of the country maybe didn't see it big until later.
We saw the news,
Yeah,
obviously.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but it took them like a week or two, and then they started taking our masks away. They started taking away our N95 masks and they were locking them up. Especially
Oh,
where I
really?
was at, they were literally locking them like in administration where we could not get to them. So even if
Mhm.
we had someone came in that had symptoms, I'm like, do I even have access to that? And other facilities, they were telling them you can't mask. At Justin's facility specifically, they were saying you're not allowed to wear a mask. So even if you wanted to, there was a guy at another campus that he got fired for wearing a mask within that first like 2 or 3 weeks
Hmm.
because they're like, well, that's not our culture. That's a whole nother topic. And then
Yeah. So
suddenly,
then did Oklahoma itself have a mask mandate and then you guys didn't have one in the hospitals, or how did that work?
no, so we started masking at that time. Like I would
Mhm.
say within a week to 2 weeks, um, you were masking. And then I think it was when they started taking things away and they started having nurses reusing masks because they're like,
Mm.
there's a shortage. We don't have anything. And
Yeah.
things were literally changing daily. Like nobody knew what was going on. Um, things that things didn't start to add up until probably April, May is when I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of people started being like, what's really going on here? And where there started to be some pushback. Um,
Hmm.
and so it was at that time that, I mean, I started having panic attacks in April. And
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
had never,
I
ever,
don't
ever
doubt
had a
that.
panic attack.
Yeah.
And so it was so mental because
Mhm.
there was so much fear. I saw a post I made the other day that was like, remember that, um, yes, viruses can be contagious, but so is fear and being irrational. And, when you threaten people, like how it creates these cycles. So I started early on having these conversations of like, hey guys, let's make sure we're trying to keep our peace as much as we can um,
Hmm.
until we figure out what's going on. Because New
Yeah.
York wasn't adding up. We started then having the conversations of, well, why are they putting everyone on ventilators? Because a ventilator is actually going to suffocate them if we actually need their lungs to expand. Like, and so that's when a lot of that conversation started happening was April, May, when a
Mhm.
lot of nurses started questioning things, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I always saw too, and what I started to question too is like, why would you put somebody on a ventilator when that's going like it usually led to, uh-oh, another person died,
Mhm.
which is crazy to think about, you know?
Yeah. And it wasn't because I mean, nurses are following physicians' orders. And
Yes.
I think there was so much chaos in the beginning, nobody questioned anything. And
Yeah.
so they're putting these people on ventilators like, oh my God, their oxygen saturation's in the 70s. Well, of course it is, because what happens? I'm like, how do I want to get into like pathophys of this? Um, how COVID works and what it does, we can jump into that a little bit. But when you put someone on a ventilator, there's little air sacs in the bottom of your lungs called alveoli, and that's where
Hmm.
that oxygen exchange happens in your lungs. So, what
Hmm.
was happening when these people's oxygen saturations were so low because there wasn't any preventative treatment, there was no education. If you were trying to educate people, even online, your account was being taken away,
Hmm.
or suddenly you would have hundreds of views on your stories and then you would have none. Um,
Hmm.
they would take your account down. They were taking posts down. Even me just encouraging people to get up and walk and drink water, they were like coming after those things.
Yeah.
So basically, once people had kind of hit that point of what people call COVID pneumonia, which I believe was possibly more a bacterial pneumonia versus a viral, they were
Hmm.
saying it was viral, but I'm like, did anybody test that? Do we know that?
Yeah.
They were not prescribing like steroids or antibiotics, at least most physicians were not,
Hmm.
um, to actually treat those things to give people a chance of recovery. They were
Hmm.
like, oh, it's viral, let's tube them. And that's where we started losing people, I think. And some of the protocols that were in place were more harmful than beneficial. And then when you bring that up, then suddenly those nurses were the bad nurses.
Right. When in all reality, it just sounds like there was just, like you said, fear is contagious, and there was so much fear, and people had no idea what they were dealing with. When you think of like a virus spreading and you see all the fear mongering that was being thrown on the media, it scared people to the point where they thought it was going to be like a fucking plague, where
Mhm.
literally, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, some people I love might not survive this initially, when I was like really into the fear.
Yeah.
And they just kind of got lost in it and just were like, you know what, we're going to trust whatever we hear because we don't know what's going on.
And anything that was trying to educate seemed to be removed quickly.
Yeah. That was something like the biggest thing you never saw during that time. Like you saw, like, stay inside, wear a mask, do this, do that, don't go outside. But you never heard, like, get sunshine, eat nutrient dense foods,
Yep.
fitness, water, vitamin D
Out of
and
bed.
C, like normal things, right?
Mhm. It was wild. It literally came to a point that for several months, as kind of more people were testing positive here, we didn't see the huge hospital influx, I should say, until that October time.
Hmm.
Um, but literally almost daily, it got to the point that it was almost daily. Somebody had heard like, "Hey, you had helped so and so," and told them like these things help prevent pneumonia. What do I need to be doing? I mean, my phone was blowing up
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, like, Tara, I blow your phone up whenever I have like a sniffle. I'm like, Tara, what do I need to do in order to feel better?
Here's the
Um,
list.
yes, here's the list. And every time, like, I had the flu after my wedding, and
Yes.
I tell you, I've never been that sick. And Tara, called Stone and told Stone exactly what to buy for me, and I survived. Thanks, Tara.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, of
I
course.
mean, if you weren't going to let him do it, like I was coming and I wasn't asking
Yeah,
questions.
she's like, I'm in Oklahoma, but Texas ain't that far. I was just
That's
there.
right.
We'll make it.
Yeah.
So then what happened around like that October time when the stuff started like really getting more rampant in the hospitals, like in your hospitals? What did you guys start to experience?
So this is like the side shot. So I ended up actually leaving being a bedside nurse in September of that year due to being
Okay.
diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a whole other side shoot of kind of where I think that was triggered from, and possibly putting something in my body that I think triggered that I hadn't had in many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a requirement at that time to take that thing
Mm.
in the
I
hospital.
didn't know that.
Mhm.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah. Um, oh, just wait for the other trend. So,
Ooh, tell
um,
me.
I literally couldn't walk. Like my foot was giant.
I
It was
remember that.
in my foot for whatever reason. And anyways, I ended up leaving bedside. Justin was still working cardiac ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was just overflow everywhere in some places for a few weeks. But then it's like the news started reporting in April or May, hospitals are full, the ERs are full. And I'm
Hmm.
like, at that time, I was like, I hadn't seen a patient in 3 weeks.
I don't know what you're talking about. There's no one here.
Um, and so I just started when I left bedside, people that I knew at different facilities around the Oklahoma City area,
Mhm.
I started keeping in contact with. Hey, what are you seeing? What's going on? What about this? And it was at that time that I feel like those are probably the everyday phone calls.
Yeah.
Um, and you started finding out what physicians were treating with um, certain medications that, they said were no-nos. There were some physicians that if you had a positive COVID test, they were giving you, like if you showed them a positive COVID test, they would give you steroids and antibiotic to prevent that COVID pneumonia.
Yeah.
And they would also prescribe you ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
Then what started happening was pharmacies were like, I'm not giving that to you, even if the physician prescribed it.
Interesting.
Um, because those ivermectin has been one of the safest drugs used for years. Missionaries have used ivermectin for years,
Right.
like the actual pill form. Um, and so it was just wild to see this. I feel like that's when it kind of started getting down and dirty here, was like people were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, why are we demonizing this? What's really going on behind the scenes? Because protocol of what they were prescribing people in the ICU, most of those patients were going into organ failure and we were losing them. And
Interesting.
nurses started seeing the trend. And for some of them, I was like, just watch. Just this is what I think is happening after lots of research and digging. I was like, patients that are getting this, patients that are tubed and then get this medication or get this medication, they then start going south.
Hmm.
Not all of them. It's never 100%,
Right.
but in
Could be
high,
too obvious.
yes. Um, they were giving the medication that everyone was getting in the hospital, but yet they were refusing to treat anyone's pneumonia. They weren't giving steroids and an antibiotic in the hospital to treat pneumonia. They were putting them on a ventilator and following protocol.
Right.
And the trends started showing that in doing that, we were losing more and more people.
Hmm. So the treatment or the protocol that was told to be done, even though it wasn't like a typical protocol for something like that, was what was like making people worse at that point.
Correct. At least that was my observation
Right.
from my husband's experience being at bedside in the ICU, and then several other ICU nurses that I was in communication with. Because I was curious what was happening in all the different places. I never
Right.
want to hear one side of the story and only take that. I want to
Hmm.
know what's happening in different places, and I think that that's the only way to get an accurate picture of what's going on in any
Right. And
situation.
that's one of my favorite parts about you is that you never just take one side and like take that side. You're like, okay, I need to know like what other perspectives are showing because that's what's so important. Everybody has a completely different perspective. How I view one thing might be completely different from how Stone views one thing, even though it's the same fucking thing. So it's important that Tara isn't just saying, this is what I saw. It's like, this is what I saw, my husband, this is what all of these other people saw. And it's just kind of like putting the pieces together at that point.
And there were other people on the other side. There's still other people that
Yeah.
they're like, no, that wasn't happening. And I'm like, okay. I mean, and I think in any situation, you can find what you're looking for. I tried really to be intentional, to be objective of
Hmm.
like, hey, did you have any COVID people this week? Hey, what about, were they on, like, what were they being given? Instead of feeding the information and then I wanted to kind of pull the information out of people in a
Right.
way to be like, okay, what are the trends we're seeing here?
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
So I have a question as far as because one thing that I heard a lot of was, the hospitals are making a lot of money with COVID deaths.
oh,
So what did you see when it came to that type of stuff?
I never saw billing or those sort of things, but I know
Hmm.
that coding wise, if someone came into the emergency room, they were then started testing everyone for COVID. And
Right.
if they tested positive for COVID, even if they came in for a motor vehicle accident and had a liver laceration and whatever, um, they were considered a COVID hospitalization, which insurance paid a significantly higher amount for one of those patients and someone that did not test positive for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we then started seeing that same trend if they had COVID within 3 to 4 weeks and then were readmitted. Um, let's say they died of heart failure or something
Yeah.
like that. If they had COVID 3 weeks before, they were ruling it a COVID death, even though we've maybe seen this patient for the last 6 years managing their heart failure. And it just so happened that those timelines aligned. They would code those as COVID deaths. And again, that's not every hospital,
Of
that's not
course.
every physician, um, but it was definitely happening. Patients in before I left the hospital, I had a sweet, sweet woman that came into the ER one night, and she was telling me that she had lost her husband recently. And they were in a like an assisted living or something like that. And she was so mad. She's like, because they kept calling him a COVID death, and he wasn't a COVID death. He fell and he broke his hip,
Yeah.
and they couldn't do surgery on him, and he went south and he passed away. He had tested positive for COVID weeks before,
Right.
but on his death certificate it says COVID.
And that's not fair.
It's sad.
Yeah, it is. Because,
Sad.
like, let's talk about that kind of stuff is the amount of people who weren't able to be with their loved ones when they passed because of a COVID protocol.
Shout out and kudos to any medical professionals that may or may not have been sneaking family up back elevators, because I know that that happened in some places, and I'm
Yeah.
like, those are the heroes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes, it
I would have absolutely done that because I could not do something like that. You know what I mean?
was
I
wild.
couldn't move somebody's family away.
hmm I felt like it depends where people were at. Every
Right.
facility was different,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I hear a lot of people saying they're like, don't forget what they did. Don't forget what they did to us, and that can be taken in really extreme ways and people can get crazy with it. But it's like, you guys, there was so many options
Yeah.
of being able to allow people to be with their family, whether it was wearing an N95, whether, whatever the case may have been. It just got to the point that things were not rational anymore.
Yeah.
It
Mm-hmm.
felt very shut up and comply, do what
Mm-hmm.
you're told to do, or you can leave. And this is even before, the hokey pokey came out.
Yeah. Hokey pokey. Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So what then inevitably caused you to leave?
For me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I left due to my arthritis at that time because the medication they were starting me on. This is a fun one for people. The medication they started me on was an immune suppressant, and they're like, you don't need to be in an emergency room if you're, or in the healthcare facility at all. If you're on an immune suppressant, especially just starting, it's
Right.
going to take your immune system. You could get COVID and not get over it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I was working from home that time doing chart audits for a home health company for a little bit. That's another crazy God story. This woman calls me out of the blue the day I got diagnosed. I woke up thinking about you. Are you at all interested in working from home for me? I need someone I know and trust. Yes, ma'am. I am very
I
interested.
am
It
very interested. How did you know?
was wild. It was wild. I hadn't told anybody. And she called me out of the blue. Crazy. We're actually closing on her house in like 10 days.
Full
It's
circle.
yeah. Um, so yeah, for me, it was then, but then I think you started to see people, I don't want to say pick a side, but people had to make really hard decisions for their families.
Yes.
And in that there was side picking, and some people were very pro, hey, I just want you to be informed. You get to make the choice from there. Other people were very militant about it. And that's when I started losing a lot of respect for people that I knew, a lot of physicians that I know, getting in nurses' faces, calling
Yeah.
them who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for my husband, though, it came to a point that when you feel like you're being put in a position to do more harm to patients that you took an oath to protect
Mm-hmm.
and actually doing good, because people only want to look at the protocol, and when you bring up something different, you're suddenly the bad guy. And so when you feel like you
Right.
have no choice, I think you kind of have to be done. Like, you have a choice of whether I'm going to feel responsible for this person losing their life or not.
Mm-hmm. It comes down to just like what's your moral code and what's your integrity,
Yeah.
Which, like, when you told me that he left, I was like, damn, good guy, you know?
Yeah,
You picked a good one.
I did.
Nice.
So
So then from there, was that like at that point in time, was that kind of like where the divide with like the vaccine kind of came into play?
so that really started in December of 19, because medical professionals, it was available to them in December
I did not know that.
of 19.
I was like, damn, Tara, that pre-COVID shit. 2021?
December of 2020 is when it came into play. Most of the population was getting it, January, February, March, if they maybe knew somebody, and then it became more widely available shortly in that time frame. But when they started talking mandates, when they started talking, you have to have this to work. If you're a medical professional, you have to take this. Um, a lot of people, the push on that, a lot of medical professionals were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? But the vast majority, even people that didn't feel safe doing that, felt like they had no choice. What we personally saw was there was a handful of people that were kind of the outliers of like, until it is, because a mandate is not a law.
Correct. Yep.
I learned a lot about the law in
Okay,
our.
me and Stone got into a fight, we'll say, a verbal war with somebody at Whole Foods once. When we lived in North Carolina, there was the mask mandate. Now it's a mandate, it's not a law, right? So we weren't wearing masks. And one dude, we were checking out. Nobody was saying anything. None of the workers, we saw like two or three other people without masks on in the store. Majority of people had masks. The guy across from us at the other checkout who was checking out a customer, I could see him just like looking at us. And I'm like, this guy's going to fucking say something to us. And lo and behold, he said to Stone, he said, what, you think you're a big tough guy not wearing a mask? And Stone was like, a mandate is not a law.
Yeah.
That's it. And the guy,
like all cool and collected.
Like, if you know Stone, it's literally like monotone, like a mandate's not a law. And then he went and he put his card in, we paid. The guy's just like going off behind us, and we just leave, and we see him. We can see through the windows when we're like in the parking lot. He's just like freaking out at the manager, and I'm like, literally, people don't understand. A mandate is not a law. It's my decision at that point.
Correct, but they aren't taught that. They don't know that.
Yep.
They don't know that until you start looking into like, okay, what are my actual rights and what does that look like? I mean, for kids, especially developmentally. Did you know that they changed the developmental milestones very quietly recently?
I didn't know that.
Like a solid 6 months, if not more, of like now they're not expected to walk till they're 18 months. And I'm like, since when? It's wild, because physicians weren't seeing people in office, during that time. The SIDS rate drastically decreased. It was like zero.
Oh, really?
Babies were dying of SIDS because they weren't getting their well baby checks after being born, or their year 2 or 3 year, checkups, and whatever parents choose to do at those checkups that may or may not be on a schedule. It was wild. It's wild, the correlations that I feel like, why isn't there conversation about this? I'm not going to say like, that's it every time, but there's a lot of weird patterns that I feel like we have enough, that's not supposed to happen. We have enough information on to be like, what is going on? And even to this day, we see that with young people that have heart failure, young people that have myocarditis, so many people in their 20s and 30s that suddenly have autoimmune stuff, that suddenly have cancer, that suddenly have some heart defect or heart failure. POTS has become astronomically, I don't want to say popular, but it's become a very common diagnosis for a lot of people.
I never heard of it until recently. And then I've had a couple clients who are like, oh, I've been diagnosed with this. And I'm like, I've never heard of this. And I've been in the fucking fitness industry working with people for over 11 years. And I've never heard of this until over the last couple of years. And I have more and more clients who are coming to me with autoimmune conditions that they've never had before, that they're struggling with so bad that it's like impacting their day to day. Right. And people who have been, given certain vaccines or have been on certain types of medications or really trust the medical system maybe a little bit too much. But obviously there's like a fine line, right? Like obviously Western medicine is an incredible thing. Like a lot of us, antibiotics are a great thing, but I feel like they're overused in a lot of situations.
For sure. And I think that's where I was kind of always a weird nurse for some people, because I was a little half and half. I was a little crunchy, a little not.
I like it.
Being a cardiovascular nurse, I saw really fit people that were in the gym every single day that were having massive heart attacks, but they also had these crazy high stress jobs. They were the CEO of this company, or
Yep.
they run this, or they are very famous for that, whatever. I mean, I got to take care of just this plethora of people. And um, I just, I think that so many times we need both. It doesn't have to be or, it's this
Yeah.
or that.
I agree.
Um, I think we have to be wise because I
Yes.
think some pharmaceuticals here are different makeup than in other countries. Just like
Mhm.
our food makeup is different here than in other countries.
Yeah, like the amount of like
Totally.
comparisons I see with things, like just comparing like say like Fruit Loops or something, like
Yeah.
UK Fruit Loops, America Fruit Loops, it's like long list of ingredients that nobody can fucking pronounce here.
Mhm.
And we're giving those foods to our kids and people are, I mean, the average American is eating
Yeah.
70% processed food. And they're wondering why they're suffering from these autoimmune conditions and we're putting estrogen dominant shit on our body with all these sprays and stuff. People are wondering why cancer, all of these things are starting to happen.
Or just like hormonal
Oh
imbalance.
my
And
God,
reach
yeah.
out to their,
Like the amount of people who have low testosterone, like men, or people
Mhm.
who can't conceive.
Yeah. And it's like, but then it's in those situations, even if it's a 10-pound difference, but even just people losing weight and regulating their blood sugar, then
Mhm.
we see people getting pregnant really easily. We see this like
Yeah.
leveling when there's some intentionality behind some things.
Mhm.
When I went to see Sam, though, Sam's Canadian, y'all. Like
Canadian Sam, she's been on here before.
Sam, um, I felt like I didn't feel like trash that week. Not that all of their stuff's fabulous. We weren't, eating complete trash, but
Right.
like, we went to the pita place. There was like a pita go and get it type store or whatever. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that sounds awesome.
I went to an Italian restaurant that they like ship in their noodles from Italy and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, huh, I don't feel bloated. I don't feel like trash. I actually feel really good.
Yeah.
That's if I go to Johnny Carino's here, I'm like, I'm done, y'all. Bye. You know?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people experience that. They go to Italy and they have like a gluten intolerance and they can eat the pasta without having issues.
Yeah. So I think it's all of it, and I think what's hard is right now the pharmaceutical world is just so in control of a lot.
In control, and also their wallets are very deep into
All of
everything.
that money.
Yep. And that's really what it comes down to
Yeah.
lately. It's a lot of just power, control, and money.
Well, and even, having RA, like I'm on a medication that I don't want to be on.
Yeah.
If I'm being fully transparent, I don't look it up. I know enough about it I don't like, but when you're 35 and you have two kids and you have to walk because I couldn't walk, I literally was on my couch for 4 months, 5 months.
Mhm.
I mean, you run out of options. Like I cleared everything out of my diet for, I mean, 8 to 12 weeks. It still didn't clear up. Started low dose medications. Those didn't work. Started another medication that wasn't touching it either. And then eventually had to be on a biologic, which, you know, I literally couldn't have to keep it in a pocket over here. Because I'm like, okay, I'm being intentional at this phase of life to how do I how do we work on some gut health stuff so that
Yeah.
maybe in a year or so I can completely wean off of that and see if we're under control? Because I mean, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like gut health, leaky gut, all of those things that play into autoimmune is just
Yeah. What I've learned is
conversation.
autoimmune comes from stress, inflammation, and poor gut health. All of
Mhm.
those things usually combine, and that's where we have like a series of unfortunate events where most people are kind of blind to it as well, because so many people in today's day and age are living such stressful lives and they don't understand the impact that the physical and emotional stress has on them. Even not getting good night's sleep consistently and then going into like this crazy ass job and doing like these high intensity workouts and eating like shit or not eating enough protein and like simple things, people don't realize the impact that it has on their body.
For sure. For
And I
sure.
think most people, I'm not going to say all because never talk in absolutes, but I think that a good percentage of people have gut issues. However, they either ignore it and just or aren't aware because they don't
Correct.
understand it.
It's not until it actually manifests in a physically uncomfortable symptom do
Correct.
they know.
But sometimes people are just bloated and they think, oh, it's just normal. I'm just bloated. And it's like, well, is that normal? No, it's just common.
Yeah. All of that. That's where I mentioned in my story earlier. I was like, and now I'm pretty sure I have like some weird protein intolerance because of shooting raw egg whites that I'm like, well, we're just gonna figure it out, because when your body stays in this constant place of chronic inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
it's like then, does that ladder just grow and grow and grow? And so anyhow, so yes, we need both. Both are necessary. We need to be responsible for what's ours to be responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also it's like sometimes you don't have a choice in a season. And I think that being intentional then moving forward is what makes it possible to get off those medications. I've seen several people that were on Humira and maybe had celiacs, those sort of things,
Mm-hmm.
come off of medication um, due to diet change and those sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, nutrition, movement, sleep, what else? Sunshine.
And
Those are
job.
literally water. All those things are literally the best sources of medicine, but most people want to just go right for the pill because that's what we've been taught.
Hmm. You know how many people come here and they're like, why do you guys have so many pharmacy ads? That's not normal in other countries.
There's like
100.
I heard it on a podcast. It's like an unbelievable percentage of it. And then when I start to really pay attention, like we don't really watch TV, but we watch YouTube, right? And a lot of the YouTube ads, it's like Pfizer this, Pfizer that. And I'm like, oh well, look who's in control, right? The ads that we see, that's who's in control.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
whoever's in control, that's where the money goes.
correct. And that's where their decisions are being made. And I think that was the hardest thing was that, there was a good handful of those physicians that we felt like were pushing back.
Yeah.
But I also know that a good handful of them were getting letters from their medical board that I got like nurses got letters. If you are found to be giving information contrary to the CDC, you can have penalties. And it's like, huh. So encouraging people to get up and walk and move and deep breathe and take vitamin C and other anti-inflammatory supplements. Okay.
Yeah. Like how to
Funny.
be a healthy human.
Yeah. Funny enough, I actually never I did not have COVID until 20 December of 21.
Oh wow.
And
You've got a while.
the only reason that I knew that I had it was because I lost my smell.
Oh yeah.
Like I couldn't taste anything, couldn't smell anything. And I honestly equate it to being on a medication that controls inflammation.
Hmm.
So I could have had it before, but I didn't know. I actually
Right.
think being on a biologic at that time, when other people were way more symptomatic, I was not because I had something else on board controlling that inflammatory response because of what was going on beforehand.
Hmm. Makes
And
sense.
then started seeing RA medications being used in hospitals.
Hmm.
I'm like, because it's an inflammatory disease process.
Right.
Like you get infected, there's kind of this big histamine response. Day 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, you have a secondary histamine response that's released. So if you're not managing those things, not that anyone's like, please give me all the drugs. I mean, I had to be like, Caitlin, freaking listen to me. Like, you
I'm
need to,
like I'm the worst with drugs, and so is Stone, so we make a really great combo.
yeah. And it's like, but how trashy you felt. I'm like, listen, we need to manage some symptoms here. And I
Thought I
gave you
was
a
dying,
list.
Tara. Thought I was dying.
And these are like over the counter meds, people,
Oh yeah. I'm not like getting like cocaine or something. But yeah, like it was like take Mucinex, take this, do that, and it definitely helped for sure.
Yeah, you were sick. You were sick.
Yeah. I'm really bad about medications, as you learned. I hate taking them because I just don't like not having control of my body and I don't like to put stuff in and I don't know what's going to happen because I've had enough things happen. I have an autoimmune IgA deficiency. But I have enough things happen where I'm so sensitive to things that like I just don't trust things at this point. And then
For sure.
Stone just doesn't trust the medical system because of a situation he had with his sister who passed away of cancer. And he just doesn't trust doctors at that point. And I
Yeah.
don't blame him, right?
Yeah.
So one situation we had with him was he was, he's in the military. He's a Green Beret, for those of you who don't know. And he was forced to get the vaccine. He waited as long as he possibly could to not get it. He fought really hard. He was like the last one to not have it. We tried religious exemptions, we tried everything. And then one day he received a text message saying, hey, if you don't have your vaccine card by formation on Monday, you will not be a Green Beret anymore. And he worked really fucking hard to get that. So that's when we had to make the decision to be like, all right, we're going to do it. And we're going to pray to God that everything's okay. First round, he was fine. Second round, he was not.
Mhm.
And he got it. I was at first form that weekend, and he told me that he felt like he had the flu. And I was like, yeah, it's probably just like the vaccine, right? It's just
Mhm.
like pretty typical. And then I got home and he had a rash all over his body. And he had this rash for like a month. And it was so bad where he was struggling to work out because it was so irritating. He couldn't sleep because it was so bad. It was everywhere. And one night I was on a call and I look over at him and his face is like fucking red. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "I can't breathe." So we had to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And mind you, he doesn't like doctors. So that was just difficult all in itself to be like, "Babe, you're dying. You need to go to the hospital." And we get there and they're like, "Okay, he's having a really bad allergic reaction. His throat's closing." So they pumped him with all the Benadryl and an EpiPen all at once. He's never had Benadryl before. And I've never seen him look so terrified in his whole life because he literally thought he was going to die from the like adrenaline of the EpiPen.
Oh yeah, like he just feels like he's running a marathon probably.
Yeah. And then he just, you have to hang out there for a while because they need to make sure the EpiPen, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we were there for a while and we had one doctor who we were like, we haven't changed anything. Like it all started when he got the second round of the vaccine, like literally started. And she was like, nope, that's not it. We've never seen that before. And then we had another doctor, I guess they switched rotations. He came in and we told him the same thing. He goes, that's interesting. I've seen that a couple times. And I was like, really weird how that works.
People were talking about it on social media. People talked about how trashy they felt and how horrible they felt and all these reactions.
Mhm.
Oh, I can't keep food and water down. How they normalize this insane adverse reaction to make everyone feel like that's just it working.
Yeah.
Mind
I had
blowing.
my cousin's fiance, his half of his face stopped working. Like it was
Felt
like all these,
palsy.
he thought he had a fucking stroke.
Yep. Yep. And I think you saw that in, I mean, I think there was a lot of people in the like Hollywood culture that, suddenly were having TIAs and suddenly having strokes. And I'm like, she is 25,
Yep. And then
you
you
know.
see all these like college athletes dropping dead,
Oh,
like dropping dead
professionals.
from cardiac arrest on the field, a
Yeah.
perfectly healthy human.
Wasn't there nine? I thought there was a video that came out that you can literally like you can write down the name and you can go trace it. 'Cause that's my thing. Anybody can make a video saying anything, but
Right.
unless you've actually like, okay, let's dig around. Let's see. Like, did this person actually pass away? There's like
Mhm.
90 something within a year on
Yeah.
protein,
And then
international team. Like, it was wild.
Yeah, and then I think I've shared this with you. I haven't shared it with a lot of people, but Stone was having really bad heart things going on. I think we were talking about it because we were really fucking concerned. Because, like, to the point where he himself, the man who hates doctors, checked himself into the emergency room one
Yeah.
morning because he was having such bad, like, arrhythmia and, like, his heart was flipping. And he said he
You
stood
see
up in
it.
the middle of the night. Yeah, you could see his heart literally beating through his chest. He got the stress test done and everything. And we were talking about it last week because he says occasionally he still feels it and it's not nearly as bad, like to the point where he wasn't able to work out. Like he would go on runs and he wouldn't be able to finish anything. He
Yeah.
got a stress test done, and when he finished like the running portion of the stress test, they had him on the table and the doctor saw the heart like coming up and he was like, "This is what I'm talking about. This is what happens." The doctor's like, "I don't know what's wrong with you." And that was kind of where they left it.
I feel like a lot of it's almost like there's this weird unwritten rule for a lot of them. Like, it's not this. It's definitely not this. We can't say that
Mm-hmm.
it would be, but I don't know. It's fine to
Mm-hmm.
not know, but
Yeah.
to ignore patterns, especially if you're asking those questions. Hey, did you have this? Did you have one or two? Which one did you have? I
Mm-hmm.
think those are fair questions, and I don't think they're being asked at all.
Yes.
And so
And
these
then,
that's not what they're finding on the study. And I'm like, what are they asking in the study? Who
yeah.
are they polling? There's so many different things that go into any kind of data gathering. As far as like, well, statistics say, and I'm like, okay, but who were they polling? Where, like,
Yep.
what questions were they asking? Like, let's look at this. Let's zoom out for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important because like my brother, he's getting a lot better now, but initially he was very, very like you're not coming to my house unless you have the vaccine or you're wearing masks, and
Yeah.
very like talking to a brick wall, like shut me out for a really long time. Luckily, he's starting to talk to me again and everything.
Oh,
But to the point where I asked him one day, because I'm ignorant sometimes and I can be a bitch. It is who I is. I asked him, hey, how do you feel about getting the vaccine after seeing an article and coming out about how it's not as effective as most people thought it would be?
yeah.
And all he did was said, get your research right. And he sent me an article from Yale. And I was like, you're literally sending me an article from the most liberal college in the fucking country. So, like, you can find whatever you want to find on the internet,
100%.
literally,
On any
whatever.
side of any aisle.
Correct. So
Yeah.
it's like you have to be able to have, I think it's just coming down to not just common sense, but being able to have an open mind, because a lot of people just don't have an open mind. They think their way is the way. And if they see it on Fox News, that's the only way. Or if they see it on CBS, that's the only way. When in all
Mhm.
reality, the media has an agenda. They
Yeah.
want views. They want more money. The more views they have, the more money they have. The more fear they put onto you, the more views they
Yeah.
get.
And they want us at each other. That the media want, like, they want this side and they want this side, like, at each other. Um,
Yep.
and I think when we really sit down, if we all sit down at a table, people that can actually like be adults and not operate in fear and operate out of a
Mm,
place of like, we can have a conversation and we can all walk away disagreeing and we're all going to be okay.
yeah.
I think that that's one of the healthiest places to be. And I feel like there's a lot more people like that than the box wants to tell us, you know?
Correct.
Um,
Yep.
but yeah, and it's not like we have to stop just demonizing the other people that are not like us, both the liberals and the conservatives. Like,
Yep. That's the
stop
biggest
demonizing each
problem is
other.
the separation that we're throwing just because it's like they don't believe the same thing that I believe, so they must be wrong and they must be like hated on. That's not
Right.
true. Like the problem is the people who are on both extreme sides. Why can't we just like meet in the middle and just understand that like this is
Yeah,
fucking America and we have a constitution that we should be withholding that a lot of people just aren't following anymore.
for sure. And I don't think people have a value for it because they haven't seen other places. They haven't been to other countries and
Right.
understand how the government works and the lack of freedom that they have. When I was
Yeah.
traveling overseas and when I was in Peru,
Yeah.
uh, when I spent a summer in North Africa, I was like,
Mhm.
what do you mean they control their internet? Like, that's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
And when I started seeing that happening in 2021, it was like, what is going on? Because
Hmm.
it's such a foreign idea. And it's not that people don't travel to other places. It's that people don't really understand um,
Yeah.
the control and the grip that other governments have on their people and
Mhm.
how they actually are not free.
Yeah. I feel like there's just a big lack of awareness and we take for granted the freedoms that we do have.
For sure. For sure. So, I thought about
Yeah.
wearing red, white, and blue for you, but I was like, give me the hoodie.
I love that. But now, like, biggest thing I want to ask you is like, in your entire journey, like
Mhm.
going through the medical system, coming to where you are now, what are you working towards right now? Because I've known you for like, I don't know, 2 years, maybe a little over,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you've been through a lot. Like, not just like with your careers, but also with like just your RA and just like everything going on in your personal life. And I'm so fucking proud of you for how happy you are now because it seems like you've really truly found that thing, like we were talking about in the beginning, that lights your soul on fire.
Yeah. I think it's people. I
Yeah. You're a great people
People are
person.
my passion. I love people. I love people's stories, where they come from, and understanding people. Um, I love America. I love America.
Fuck
And it's
yeah,
people
America.
get so mad about that because I'm
Yeah.
like, guys, the people that I spent time with in Peru, how I talk about America and how much I love America and I love my people and I love my country, they do the same. My friends that
Mm.
are here that are Brazilian, they are so proud to be Brazilian. They are so proud to fly that flag. Like, there's some stigma, weird stuff added to it, and I think that long term, I would love to be able to have more conversations like this with people.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to do public speaking one day. On what? I don't know. There's lots of topics I could cover.
I think you could be so good at that type of stuff because again, like I've said, you're like you're really good at connecting with people. Like the amount of times where I would talk to somebody from Hidden Summit and they'd be like, oh, Tara, she's the best. Everybody fucking knows Tara because Tara takes the time to go out and connect with people and truly learn who they are and where they are at.
Yeah. I think that I want people to feel seen and heard. I want them to feel known. Um, and so I used to do that in the medical world. Now I get to do that in real estate. And it's been recently that I'm like, I don't feel like that's the end of it. Like, I'm not leaving real estate, but there's other things that I'm like, okay, there's more to this. And I don't know what it looks like. I have no plan of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, but I've always loved arenas of people. I don't need to be the one on stage. If I am, great, we'll figure it out then. But I love seeing spaces filled up with people that are being encouraged and inspired and like sent out to make the world better, and we can do that here.
Yeah.
That can also happen, downtown Oklahoma City, with thousands of people in an arena. I think that we can't lose the face to face. We can't lose the conversational piece. And I hope that in my transparency, whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through, things like this, that people feel free to be themselves. They feel inspired to go after whatever the heck they want to do, and risk and know that it's going to be okay. Like, oh, Gary V, man, that man loves people so fiercely. And I'm like, I just want to do that. I just want to do that. I want to love people really well.
You'd be good at that. You would. And the thing about Gary Vee is that he's fucking Gary Vee. He doesn't pretend to be anybody else. He's who he is, and he doesn't fucking apologize for it. Too many people we see on social media are fake as fuck.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
a lot of people that you meet in person aren't the same that
Yep.
they are on social media. And it's an unfortunate truth, but it's like that's why it's so important to not trust everybody you see and kind of do your own digging, do your research and see like, hey, is that person actually doing what they say that they're talking about? Is
For
that
sure.
person actually like helping people, or is that person just trying to, feed their ego and fill their wallets?
Yep. I want to connect people. Great. If, as far as a business side of my life, like, yeah, if you need to buy or sell a house, I would love to be the one that helps you do that if you feel like I'm the person for you. If I'm not the
Mhm.
person for you, please let me go help you find that person if you don't have them, because it's not
Yep.
about me. I want you to feel taken care of well.
Yep.
And, it could be that I just get you connected to other people. I've kind of always naturally been a connector. Um, and real estate's been the first place that I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, this is how I
Yeah.
could bring this into this world. But I think with what we've seen with working together, at a company being like, okay, like the world's a big place and the internet removes so many divisional lines that it's kind of endless.
It really is. Like, let's talk about that for a second because Sam was my client, Sam Ecclestone, Canadian Sam.
Canadian
Um,
Sam.
yeah, that's how I refer to her because Sam Norman is shit show Sam. That's a whole nother story. But we got
Okay.
Canadian Sam. So Sam was my client, and when I went to Hidden Summit, I brought her into the Hidden Summit ecosystem. And then, of course, you being at Hidden Summit, that's how you guys were connected. And
Mhm.
it's wild how that worked. And then you guys were both at my fucking wedding because Sam took a trip and like you road tripped out, and now you just came back from a trip to Canada visiting her. So it's
Yeah.
so cool how like
Well, me and
that,
you connected in Florida when I was there on a
right?
work trip.
Right? Yeah. You were like, hey, I'm like an hour from you. And I was like, where are we going? First watch, of course.
Of course.
But it's so crazy how that works and how so many people like see the dark side of social media. But what about like the bright side too? There is a bright and a dark side to everything. You
Yeah.
just have to be willing to look for it.
Yes. I think figuring out how I can serve people, whether that's this stuff is gold, but how do we do this on a larger platform of um, encouraging and inspiring people to be fully themselves in every season and going after what they really want instead of feeling stuck of this is what I was told life had to be.
Yeah.
But if some of that unravels, it's like, oh, what's really in us?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that's like what both of us want to do at the core, right? Is like, how can I inspire one person and impact that one person, have that person impact another, and kind of like create that ripple effect? Because
Yep.
that's what this podcast is all about. That's what the powerhouse mentality is all about, which is why like you're just such a big part of like everything. Like I see you as a huge friend, and I'm so excited that we did this finally.
I know it's filled my soul up.
I'm so excited, but I hope that everybody who's listening got a shit ton of value from this podcast. Whether you're like tinfoil hat like us and you just wanted to like kind of listen to all the behind the scenes of the medical system, or if you just wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about Tara. I think this was such a great conversation. And you're definitely going to be back on the podcast. We're just gonna have to figure that out. And I think that it would be really cool to have myself, you, and Sam on the podcast just having fun, you know?
Mhm. That would be so much fun. I'm like,
Yes, I know. It's like I'm already super excited for this. When are we gonna have it? Let's just get Sam in here right now.
yeah.
But is there anything else that you want to say to anybody out there who might be afraid to, I don't know, start on something or take a risk? Anything that you want to say before you go?
Man, I don't know. I just want to encourage you to live without regret. Like, it's okay to fail, but what if you never try? What if you never tried and you never know what would have happened and what if it could have been the best thing ever? Because I considered doing real estate for 10 years before I ever jumped and did it. I just didn't tell anybody. Kind of had a gatekeeper friend. And I've jumped and I did it and brought my husband home from working for a builder. And now we're a team together. And I'm like, almost every single day, I'm like, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago.
I totally understand that. Kind of like the same thing that I just did, right?
Yeah.
Take a risk and go all in. Because that's the only way you're going to know. Don't get to the end of your life and think, shit, I
And you
ran
don't
out of
have
time.
to have it figured out.
Yeah, exactly. You have to just jump and then build the parachute on the way down, is how I like to say it.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Tara, for coming on to the podcast. And everybody who's listening, make sure you share this. Go follow Tara on her social media. I'll put it down below and go out and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.